Hi, everybody. I'm Anna Hagan, and this is Next in Sales, a Next Level podcast. I am so excited to introduce you guys to our special guest today. We are talking with Marni Heinz, and she is currently a sales and sales leadership coach. Marni, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. I would love if you could give our viewers just a little bit of background on yourself before we dive into the questions we've got for you today.
So currently I'm a leadership coach, executive leadership coach, formerly VP in enterprise sales at Salesforce. Had a long history in sales, 12 years at Salesforce. So going from solution engineer, then making my way into the sales role on account executive, covering accounts like Disney and Sony and Fox and Experian, a wide range of customers in the enterprise space, and then ultimately moved into leadership. And then just recently decided to take the leap into coaching.
Awesome. And so I know that you started out your career at Google in IT. How did you make the transition into sales?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I was in IT for about 10 years before I moved into sales. And I had the chance to implement software, including CRM software. At the time, I was implementing software for CRM that was not best in class. So I got the chance to experience what that was like on behalf of my customers. And it wasn't the most pleasant experience. The projects were long. They didn't always succeed. And when I was at Google, I got the chance to then from there go into the experience of running and leading IT for the legal department at Google. So that included contract management, e-signature software, and I got the chance to be a buyer of technology. And in that experience, I was like, wow, this is like a totally different experience to be the purchaser of the software. And I saw how the differences were and the nuances in the people coming in from these software companies, of people that would maybe bring the whole school bus in but not really listen, and those that would listen and really spend the time one-on-one with you. And I was really drawn to those people that really had the deep listening skills, were focused on business value, were more so doing consultative sales. And I was like, wow, that looks like a fun job. And you can actually add business value to your customers and solve real material beauty problems a lot faster than if you're implementing software or on the buy side. And so I decided, hey, I want to go do that and give that a shot. Still solving problems on behalf of people and companies, but doing it at a faster pace and in a way that's, I felt like a little more exciting at the time and a change.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, when you were starting out your sales career, what's something that you know now that you wish that you had known then when you were starting out? And when and how did you learn that?
Yeah, so I would say it's interesting because I am a very impatient person, as I'm sure a lot of people are. Yeah, it might be a trait for people in sales. So I wanted to, in full transparency, like when I left Google, I wanted to move into the account executive role. And what I learned is the path to get there at Salesforce was to move into solution engineering. And so then from there, it was like, well, then the next path can naturally become an account executive, because often the solution engineers know the product so well, they make the best account executives. And when I moved into that AE role, I was like, wow, the AE role is very different than the solution engineering role. And I was no longer perceived to be the smartest person in the room or the person that knew the technology well or knew how to problem solve. So that shift was really kind of jarring for me of how people perceive me in the account executive role.
And isn't it interesting how title can really change people's perceptions of you?
Yeah, we stereotype. That's human nature. It's kind of how the brain works. And so I was experiencing that, and it was jarring. And at the same time, it was healthy and a good way to learn what it meant to me in the sales role. And I think one of the biggest things I learned is just to enjoy the experience and the ride, because you never get to have that chance back again. So people want to push their way into being in enterprise sales and get there tomorrow. And the reality is there's so much learning that occurs along the way.
Well, so, I've talked to a ton of people in sales, especially doing sales recruiting, from everything from SDRs to AEs to regional sales directors and VPs of sales and more. And really the overarching theme that I've heard is that rejection is probably the hardest thing to deal with as a salesperson. So, given your experience and considering the coaching that you do now, what is your advice to those who are starting out or who might just even be struggling on how to push through that rejection?
Yeah, I would say a bit of it is normal and natural. So the first thing I would say is that to have that feeling of rejection is kind of a normal and natural experience, especially when you're new to sales and you're in a cold calling type of role or outreach role. And at the same
Absolutely.
time, it's important to put yourself in the shoes of the other person that you're reaching out to. So picture what it's like to reach out to an executive, for example, that's got a super busy schedule, so much on their plate. They barely have time like for themselves, their family, and then work on top of it. And you're just another email or outreach or call that comes through. And
Right.
when you start to look at it from that perspective, you're like, wow, okay, it's not that surprising that they don't really have time for me. And it's probably just another thing piled on their plate and it doesn't fit into the prioritization list. So always put
Yeah,
yourself in the shoes of the other person. And that also reminds you that you need to be delivering something of value. And so always putting attention on that as well. And then I know people say this all the time, don't take it personally. There is some truth to that, I would say, in the sense that, yeah, I mean, if you look at it not as you as a person, but you're just another thing that they have to give attention to in a very busy schedule, it's actually not
Mhm.
about you. It's actually just that they have a lot on their plate potentially. And then it gives you the chance to learn also, I would say, from that outreach, like depending on the types of responses that you
Absolutely.
get, how do you adjust your approach or maybe put yourself in the shoes of that prospective customer. We're also all buyers too. You might notice like how do you respond when someone reaches out to you with a cold outreach? Might do the same thing sometimes, and
Right.
what is it
Exactly.
that attracts your attention when you're the one being reached out to, and start adjusting your behavior to what you notice that works well, and kind of stop doing those things that don't work so well because it can get discouraging.
Yeah, and I love that you brought up, focusing a little bit more on their needs as opposed to your product, because I think that's so important today. If you're not coming to them with value already on the table, just to show them, hey, like this is how I'm helping this other person solve this problem. Are you experiencing this? As opposed to saying, oh my gosh, I have this most amazing product in the world and you need to try it. If you don't show them why, then why do they want to listen to you anyways?
Yeah, another thing that you just brought up that reminds me of kind of like the early days at Salesforce. Salesforce, when it got started, they were blazing a new trail within the space of CRM and
Mm-hmm.
selling to the actual business people rather than IT, which was very different. And at the time, the best way that they sold, and I got the chance to experience this when I came on board, was through customers talking to other customers.
Yeah.
So if you can actually sell the value of your solution by saying, so and so got this benefit, this other company got this benefit, this other person received this in return, you're actually doing yourself a service because you're taking the attention off yourself and your product and you're putting the attention on the value that others get from what you offer.
Yeah,
Mm.
absolutely. So I know when we had originally talked, you obviously had been involved in building a lot of really successful sales teams. And, today hiring is arguably harder than it's ever been with the onset of remote work environments. So for you, what advice would you give sales leaders on how to build a quality hiring process?
Yeah, it's a good question. What I have been noticing more and more lately, and this has been also in conversation with other sales leaders and recruiters, is putting attention more so on some of the qualities that are above and beyond just the basic skills of selling. You have
Yeah.
to obviously interview for those, basic fundamental skills for the role and the level that you're hiring at, which is going to look different from an enterprise seller than someone that maybe is a BDR or business development rep. Once you've got those basic fundamental skills, it's important to also interview for some of those things that are often called the softer skills, but things
Mhm.
like having a growth mindset, like
Yeah.
the motivation factor of, are they willing and interested and hungry to learn something new? The ability to have deep listening skills, as well as a sense of self-awareness of how they're being perceived by others. Yeah, those are the kind of skills that at the end of the day, sometimes are a little bit more challenging to teach someone. And
Absolutely.
while they can be taught, it would be nice to be able to hire someone in that has that perspective and that approach.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that term, growth mindset. It's because at the end of the day, like you said, you can't really teach that. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them want to drink.
Mhm. I love that saying. That is true. Yes.
Well, you've obviously seen a lot of different people in your time move into sales leadership roles, and I'm sure that you've seen varying results from that. So, when it comes to sales specifically, what do you think is the most common mistake that you see people make when they're moving into a leadership position for the first time?
Yeah, one that I've seen myself, and I actually had the chance when I moved into sales leadership, I actually did it very intentionally. I went to one of the top sales leaders at Salesforce to get guidance, let her know I wanted to move into leadership and ask for her perspective. It's almost like an informational interview. And she shared, "Hey, do you know what it's like to move into sales leadership?" And I said, "Yeah, I know what it's like based on being an account executive reporting into my RVP at the time." And she's like, "Yeah, that's the perspective of an account executive. Why don't you go learn what it's really like to be an RVP?" So I went and interviewed over 16 people, and I got the chance to really understand that perspective of going from individual contributor into sales leadership. I interviewed people at first line level leader roles, second line, and even some third line level leader roles to truly get the perspective. And this is a question that I asked a lot of people too, is what do you wish you know now, being 2, 3, 4, even maybe even 5 years into being in a leadership position, going from individual contributor to leader? What do you know now that you wish you would have known then? And there were
Yeah.
2 or 3 common themes. One was that it's important to lead with empathy. A lot of times in sales, you've got the high performing individual contributor, rock star AE that goes and becomes the sales leader of a team. And it's a very different skill set to lead a team.
Yeah.
So you really need to put attention on leadership skills, managing, leading the team. And that also requires getting to know each person on the team as an
Right.
individual person. What motivates them? What works well for them? What are their strengths? How can you help them, assist them, and support them? Which is a very different skill sometimes than being the superstar AE. So a lot of people would share that they might have taken a command and control approach initially, which did not work so well. And as soon as they shifted their tune to empathy, they started to see a lot more results from the team.
Yeah.
Yeah, being the super AE and then coming in and then kind of having a particular approach in comparison to taking the approach of empathy is probably, I think, one of the most common themes that I heard, which was helpful for me moving into leadership to have that sense of self-awareness to put attention on those softer skills when I moved into the role.
Absolutely. And, I think it's also important to note that every team structure is going to be different. Not every single person is going to be a top performer. And being able to work with somebody and understand that, I think is super, super important. And I've heard a lot of sales leaders talking about how everybody on your team is going to play different roles and they're going to be different and they're going to need to be coached differently. And learning how to do that can be both exciting and difficult to navigate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was had the good fortune of being in like a team-based environment for most of my sales career because I was covering enterprise accounts, and they have the mega teams that could be upwards of 40 people big, which meant that I also got exposed to a lot of different sales styles from different account executives or product specialists. And so what I learned over the course of time is that there's no one particular style that works well. There are actually many styles that work well in terms of being a successful account executive. So going into leadership, a lot of people think, they need to look just like me and have my particular style and way of selling. And the reality is it looks different for each person, and yet it can be successful in many different ways.
Right. It's so interesting because what's going to work for me and how I sell is probably going to be very different than how you would sell. And because not all personalities match well with certain selling styles, it just depends on who you are as a person. And so I love that you really highlight, getting to know your team as individuals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's actually makes it more fun too as a leader to get to know the different styles and get curious about what works, what doesn't work. And you can even actually learn something new as a leader as well sometimes.
Right. Leaders got to have the growth mindset too.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think are maybe the one or two top things that have helped you succeed in your sales career?
I would say a couple of things. So one, and this has been a work in progress, I'll say, I have a natural tendency to want to do things on my own and do it myself. And what I've noticed over time is actually leaning on the community of people that I have around me is actually going to lead to greater success. Especially, I've come from the enterprise space. There's like your deals aren't going to be as big if you're going it alone. That's just the reality of it. You need a team, and the team could be a team of, solution engineers, customer success managers. It might be the leadership team to help come in and build those executive relationships. There's also partners involved often as well to implement the software. And so building strong relationships there. So I would say probably the number one thing that I've learned over the course of time that's made me successful is to lean on and rely on a community of people rather than trying to go it alone and do it all myself. Because you end up with bigger deals and more success. And it's a lot more fun too, I would say, when you're working with others.
Yeah, I agree. I think that when you have the opportunity to win together, I think that that's honestly the most rewarding. It is rewarding to be able to say, like I did this all throughout, but being able to share in that success with somebody, I think personally is super rewarding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would say it like one of the more rewarding experiences that I've actually had. I think I talk about this on occasion, but it's I covered the Gap account, and I live in San Francisco, and they're also part of the local community. They're headquartered in San Francisco, just like Salesforce is headquartered in San Francisco. I'd walk around the corner to their office, and I remember at one moment in time they were struggling to implement Service Cloud for their call center, and that was an area of expertise for me. So I also got to come in and help them. So even your customer can be part of your community. You can win together with them. And so it was actually really fun to have the experience of kind of turning something around and making it into a big success with people showing up at Dreamforce and giving talks on their success. So winning together can also include your customer too.
That's awesome. I love that perspective. What do you think what do you believe holds sellers back from reaching their full potential?
It's a good question. I would say some of it, there's probably a few different things. The first thing that comes to mind is mindset. So if getting discouraged and kind of I mentioned growth mindset as being one option. However, there's a lot of sellers out there that kind of get stuck in a rut where you miss your number or something feels like it's not going quite right, and you kind of go into a scarcity mindset. So it's almost the opposite end of the spectrum or pendulum of a growth mindset. And so, finding yourself in that place and having trouble kind of digging yourself out of it can lead to yet another missed quarter and then another one and another one. So having a mindset towards success, I call it sustainable success, and a growth mindset, and having some grit and fortitude and resilience to know that you're going to power through it and get there. I would also say having a strong vision is important. I've noticed a lot of sellers are just focused on the next call that's right in front of them, the next deal that's right in front of them. And if you want to be successful in software sales, you really need to be focused on the long haul, which can be having an eye towards the success that you're going to have, but not just in your software career. How does that success translate into your personal life as well? Because when you tie your work life into your personal life, you're actually going to kind of have that sense of like, I'm doing something important, a sense of purpose that translates into other parts of your life to kind of keep the motivation up and remind yourself of why you're there and why you're doing the job.
Yeah, I love that. And kind of going back to that idea of a growth mindset, what do you think are some ways that anybody in sales can really perpetuate that in their day-to-day life? What tools or resources have you seen, especially from your from your coaching that works really well to embody that and add that into your day to day?
Yeah, I would say the number one thing, and this comes from personal experience of myself, like the year that I was most successful in sales, I had developed some habits for myself that worked quite well. And those habits started first thing in the morning. So it's starting your day without just getting up and hopping on the computer, but instead starting your day from a place of, get up and for me, it was doing a bit of exercise from there, a 10 to 20 minute meditation practice followed by, journaling and a bit and doing a gratitude practice of 3 things that I'm grateful for. And I often add in one thing that I'm grateful for about myself, because sometimes we forget to include ourselves in the part of the appreciation, which is key.
Right.
And then setting an intention for the day. So if you had one intention that you would like to have for the day, if you had only one thing you were going to accomplish and one intention, what would that one thing be? So to try to simplify things and start your day off from this place of intentionality, gratitude, and giving yourself some space.
I love that. Being super intentional is very much part of my personal values, and I love the idea of like being super intentional with how you start your day and how you spend your time is going to be incredibly important, not only for your personal life but your professional life as well.
Mm-hmm. I can add to that a bit just because it's coming to mind. One of the things that my team would share with me is because I did ask on the way out leaving Salesforce, hey, what are some things just for feedback? I always value feedback, both giving and receiving. So I requested feedback of, what makes me stand out as a leader. And there were some common themes. One of them was that I'm very intentional. And I would step into meetings asking right from the start, what's your intention for the meeting, for the person leading it, and or your purpose? And what would you like to have accomplished in the X amount of time that we have together, the 30 minutes, 60 minutes. And it was just amazing how simply putting attention on the intention of the meeting actually gave everyone the permission to kind of focus in on what's most important and led to fruitful, productive meetings with really great outcomes. So it's very simple, but important.
No, I love that because I'm thinking through it in my mind. And if you're able to set an intention at the beginning of the meeting, then you know where you want to end up at the end of the meeting, as opposed to just kind of walking in and saying, I have all of these things that we could talk about or discuss, so let's bounce around. But if you set an intention at the beginning of a meeting or your day, or even just for an hour of just doing some work, it can really transform your time and your ability to have that clarity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, who do you look up to in the world of sales, Marni?
It's so funny. And like, I asked me this question. No, I'm just kidding. I'm the kind of person that I don't tend to put a lot of people on pedestals. I treat everyone as kind of fairly equal. And so the types of people that I look up to are actually people that I have either worked for or been exposed to in the field of sales. So I'll give an example of someone that I got the chance to work with way back when I was at Google. And as a buyer at the time, I was purchasing software from EchoSign. And so both Jason Limpkin and Eten Saban both came in and they were essentially selling EchoSign to me. And Eten is someone who I've stayed in touch with ever since. And he's gone off to run an international sales team and run, these really great sales teams and become a great leader in sales himself.
Yeah.
And so I now look to him as someone that I admire and look to in terms of what it takes to do well in sales and also what it takes to be a great leader. And I find that having mentors that are people that you can relate to, that, they are 1 or 2 steps maybe from where you are is like huge in helping to propel yourself forward. So the types of people that I actually look to are people that I can like literally turn around and look at and have a conversation with. And that being
absolutely
one. Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Marni. I've loved having you on here. Do you have any last advice for our viewers that you'd like to share?
No, I would just say sales, it's kind of interesting because right now in tech, I would say that, with everyone knows about the layoffs and everything that's going on. And so The mood can be a bit somber, and at the same time, there's probably two messages. One, focus on what matters, and at the end of the day, that's you. And if you put the attention on you and what matters most, things will work out. And the other thing that I think we've lost a little bit of sight of, probably just within the past few years with COVID, the pandemic, keeps going, is to have fun. Work can be so serious, and you put so much attention on the big deals and so much pressure, and it's like, it doesn't need to be hard all the time. So add some fun into the work that you're doing.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Marni, for your time. I've loved having you on. Thank you guys so much for tuning in to Marni and I's conversation today. Again, this is Next in Sales, the Next Level podcast. And if you liked what Marni and I had to say today, love if you could like, subscribe, share this podcast, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.